see, what the devil will do is he will contaminate anything that's good, right? And this is a wonderful event, right? It's a wonderful event, but what the devil will make you do, especially, it's been a long day already, right? Y'all done ate twice already. You know? And it don't take long to check out mentally and still be here present physically, right? But what the enemy will do is he'll take this wonderful event and he will just reduce it to a girl's trip. He'll reduce it to just a weekend getaway. You know, and you don't want the devil to steal that from you. So you have to be intentional for listening. I don't care from the youngest person to the oldest person. God has something for you, for your life. So you got to listen to it, right? So I just want to talk about me, right? Sister Gibbons gave me permission to do that. You know, the Sister Carla, she talked about her experiences, right? And that's what I learned too in my 42 years of living. I learned that whenever God allows you to go through pain, he makes it a podium for his glory, right? He makes it a podium for his glory. So, and this is for everybody. And I say podium, this is a physical podium, but everybody has a podium. Everybody has been positioned in life to testify of the goodness of God. And even if you don't get a chance to open your mouth in this type of setting, your life should testify of the goodness of God, right? So if you bring your hurts, if you bring your frustrations, if you bring those, your disappointments and even your failures to God, he will use that as a stage for his own glory. And even if you look at the individuals in the Bible, you see that God is in the business of blessing broken things and broken people and using them as vessels for his glory, right? And of course, we saw in the circle on last night that this room is filled with a lot of different experiences, right? A lot of different challenges and a lot of different hurts. And our stories don't all look alike, but one thing that I do know, like I said earlier, is that God is calling all of us not to just stay where we are, you know. And somebody said something about, I think it was JJ talked about the enemy, how a spirit of comparing has the ability to rob you not only of your joy and your contentment, but it has the ability to rob you of growth. Because a lot of times what we do is, in our pride, we compare ourselves to people who are less than. And so we always feel more accomplished, right? But it's very seldom that, and then sometimes when you deal with poor self-image, you'll constantly compare yourself to individuals who you feel are better than. And so you still don't grow because you'll never feel like you're good enough. Well, let me tell you, ain't nobody good enough. Nobody is good enough in here. Nobody in this room has arrived. I don't care how much book, chapter, and verse you know. I don't care how many scriptures you can quote. I don't care if you can pray the paint off the walls. You are not good enough. You ain't good enough, right? So now I'm going to talk about me, okay? So, of course, we got some young people in this room. I had to press rewind. And you know, anytime I'm reflecting on these circumstances in life, anytime I'm afforded an opportunity to speak, it requires me to press rewind. And there's never been a moment where I don't walk through the events of my life and shed tears, just thinking about some of the stuff that I've gone through. But you know what? It's not, I don't cry because I'm sad about it. I cry because I know somebody else is going through it and somebody else is right there where I used to be. You know, and so, but it's always a blessing to be able to look and recognize and stay connected to where you've been, right? And staying connected to those raw emotions, because a lot of times the way we drop the ball in ministry is we try to put people where you want them to be, but we don't have an ability to meet them where they are, right? And so because I get to that in a minute, I don't want to rush, okay? So anyway, as a teenager, right, I was like a lot of even adults, because it's not just teenagers that deal with low self-esteem and poor self-image, right? During my junior high year, I went to live with my grandmother, which I did not want to go, but I went to help her out a little bit, and she was, you know, not the best person to rear children, you know? And so it had gotten so bad that I went through a season where I was not only depressed, but I was suicidal, right? And so one night in particular, I cried myself to sleep because I took a bottle of pills and I had prayed and hoped not to wake up, but at the same time I was sad about who would be hurt that I was leaving, right? But of course I woke up, right? But I didn't realize then, you know, of course, I know now that God was calling me during that season of my life, but I was on an unchurched team. You know, we didn't go to church. I didn't have anybody lead me to the Lord. So even though the Lord was calling me through that struggle, I didn't answer the call then, right? So, what is this? Okay. So after that, I graduated from high school. You got page numbers and stuff. I'm like, wait a minute. So after that, I got out of high school and everything, but I'm still dealing with this low self-esteem, right? So I'm standing on the bus stop after I graduated from high school. You know how when you graduate from high school, I was very determined to stay a virgin when I was in high school, because my teammates were they were on something, for real, they were on something. Yeah, I was like, this is not normal. So, but that was the only standard that I had for sexual purity, was just don't give it up while you're in high school, because I had two older sisters that both got pregnant, before they got married and all that stuff. But this is something that wasn't, being embedded in me or anything. It was just my own personal standard. So when I got out of high school, you know how when you turn 18, you graduate from high school, all of a sudden you think you're more mature than you are, and you're really not, And so I'm thinking that I can handle certain situations now that I made a priority not to deal with when I was in high school. So I was sitting on the bus stop. I wasn't sucking on the lollipop, but I was sitting on the bus stop waiting for the bus, and this dude started talking to me, and he would become my first love, right? And actually, when I was with him, that's when I started going to church for the first time consistently in my life. And that's how I was introduced to Christ and introduced to the Church of Christ, actually. And so I would go to church with him and his grandmother. And it wasn't until I was about 7 months pregnant that I obeyed the gospel of Christ, right? But after about a week or so of playing Russian roulette, because I knew that when I was coming into this relationship with God, that he had some expectations of me, right? And so I was like, man, but if I stop doing what I'm doing over here, he gonna leave me, right? So I said, man, what am I gonna do? I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead and get married, and then 2 weeks later, I'll go ahead no, I did it backwards. I said, let me go ahead and obey the gospel and do what God is calling me to do, because I really understood what God was calling me to do. And then 2 weeks later, I went on and got married, and that's what I call the little window of playing Russian roulette with my soul, And so anyway, here I am in this marriage to this young man, and I was, 21 when I got married the first time. And, but I was still struggling with low self-esteem. So here this dude is, very unfaithful, very inconsistent, abandoning the family and all that kind of stuff. So I struggled in that. And I think we lived about 5 years just being separated. But I lived still I was a married woman, but I was by myself. And I know some of us know what that's like, And so while I was going through that, my relationship with God began to grow, But let me tell you what God showed me, because while I was married to him, I would pray, because, I'm a new Christian now, I'm so much better than he is, because he doesn't even go to church, I go to church, right? And so I was praying to God, and I was like, God, you see what he's doing to me? He's not right. You need to get him. He ain't helping me. He ain't helping the kid, and all this kind of stuff. And you know what God told me? First of all, he said, you want me to rescue from your troubles, but you don't want me to deliver you from your demons. And I was like, what demons? I ain't got no demons. I ain't the one in the streets. It's him the one with the problems, right? But I received that. And then God showed me that, because I'm like, I want you to get him, right? And I'm like, he ain't a good father, he ain't a good husband, and all this kind of stuff, You need to do something with him, Lord, because I'm on point, And God showed me, he says, you looking at the wrong person to determine how well you sit with me. And God showed me that while you sitting up here praying that God fix this man, you forgot to pray that I fix you. And so God showed me that when I married that man, guess what? I never developed an agape kind of love for him, because I didn't even know what agape love was. I wanted him for an eros kind of love, a phileo kind of love, every other kind of love except an agape kind of love. And that's why initially when God showed me that you love this man, but you don't love him the right way, because I didn't care about him being a good man if he wasn't good for me. That's how you know you have an agape kind of love. Do I love this man enough to say, you know what, even if he's not good for me, I want him good. I want him good. Yeah. And then God showed me, he says, you want me to gift you, but you don't want me to grow you. So I don't know, you gotta switch some things around here, right? So God reprioritized myself, right? So God showed me that I was close enough for the transitions from the point A's to the point A's, from the point A's to the point B's, but I wasn't close enough to Him for my transformation. And so we gotta make sure that we're not just in this. I don't want to call it a pseudo relationship because it might be a genuine relationship, but this thing is not just what God is doing for you down here. This is what God is doing through you. And see, that's the thing about it. We want God to be a blessing to us. We want Him to gift us and give us stuff, but we don't necessarily want to develop a mindset to be a vessel for God's glory, because God will be a blessing to you so He can get a blessing through you, right? It's not just about you. Okay, so of course that marriage didn't last, right? So I was separated for about 5 years, and when she was 5, I finally could afford a divorce, and so I did that after he had already moved on and had children, other children and everything, And so I spent 6 years by myself. I spent 6 years from the time we were done to that divorce by myself, right? And now, I'm still a young woman. I'm probably about 26 years old or so, I'm just saying. I'm 26 years old, So I was like, okay, and I'm serious. I'm like one of those sisters at the church where people bring them to me because I'm so faithful to the Lord, right? And so I started having this conversation. I was like, okay, how you doing, Jesus? You doing okay? Good. I need to talk to you about some things, right? I've been a very good Christian. I mean, really good. I'm talking about when I say celibate, I was celibate. But it wasn't easy, right? Because like I said, I was a young woman, right? And I told the Lord, I was like, I've been really good for a long time, and I think it's time for you to bless me with a husband. I think it's time for you to bless me with a husband, And so one day, again, I was driving down the street. There's something about finding these jokers on the street. You don't want to do it on the street. My goodness, went from a bus stop to a street, okay? So here I am driving down the street, right? And I'm actually taking some sisters home, right, from church. And the car coming in the opposite direction, a tire popped off the car, jumped the median, slammed into my car, right? So I had to deal with that situation, right? So I'm talking to this dude, and I'm looking at him like, ooh, he is so cute. Look at his lips. I like me some sugar. So I'm looking at him like, man, of course we had to take care of business, so I got them digits, right? And I'm trying to take care of business, but in my back of my mind, I was like, ooh, I just told the Lord that He needs to send me a husband because I've been so good, right? And I think this might be the one, right? So after 6 years of serving the Lord and crawling in my celibacy, because I sure wasn't running or walking in, I felt like the Lord had finally rewarded me for my faithfulness, right? It's about time, Jesus. It's about time. Well, as soon as we started dating, out of those 6 years of celibacy, soon after we started dating, I found myself in a sexual relationship with this man. Yeah, exactly. And so here it is. Now, I'm in this sexual relationship, upstanding sister in the church, and I was feeling guilty and I was feeling ashamed, but not ashamed enough to stop. So you know what I did? I tried to right my wrong, and guess what I did? I got married again. Right? I got married again. So, needless to say, he was husband number 2. And if I had time to tell you, if y'all know the story of Abigail and Nabal, Nabal, his name meant foolish. I was married to Nabal number 1, and then Nabal number 2, But anyway, so I married him, right? And God showed me very early in their relationship a few things, first of all. He showed me that if you're going to serve me, you're going to serve me because you love me. Not because you think you can manipulate me or obligate me into giving you anything. I don't owe you nothing. That's what he showed me, right? And then he showed me that it was your spiritual immaturity and your disobedience to me They got you exactly what you wanted. But you know what? You got your husband. But guess what? I didn't give him to you. I didn't give him to you. And then what God showed me is that the enemy will send you a counterfeit to meet you in your places of desperation. But guess what? He'll also send you a counterfeit in your places of pride and entitlement. I wasn't desperate for a man. I wasn't desperate for a husband, but I felt entitled to one. Because I had been so good for so long, I felt like the Lord should have gave me one, right? So I got everything that came with him. That baggage, right? I got his drug addiction. I got his domestic violence. I got his sexual abuse. I got his adulterous ways. I got hiding my purse so he wouldn't steal my money. And I got all the ugly between the lines. I even got being drugged out of a car at 2 months pregnant on the side of the highway being told to walk home. I got all that stuff, right? So I know what it feels like to be ashamed when you mess up because you step outside of the will of God. Because most of the time we know better. We know better. We got people that love us to say, don't go down that street. That ain't where you. And I had somebody tell me that, don't do that, sister. But I did it anyway. You don't know me. You don't know him. You don't know him. Ooh, I get on my own nerves. I know what it feels like to let your children down because you picked a man like that. You know, when you've been raising your child as a single parent, because we had a child together, both of those husbands I had a child by. I know what it's like to feel like you let your child down because all the drama that I was exposed to, she was too. My oldest daughter was too. You know, and I could tell you a whole bunch of stories, but for time's sake, I won't go there. And I know what it's like to make a decision, to borrow money for food or gas for the week. And you know what? I know what it's like too to have people in your family. I know what it's like to have people in your family say, I'll help you if you leave. But one thing, let me tell you one thing about me. I always said, if you're going to help me, you're going to help me, but you don't get to control my options. You don't get to tell me what to do because at the end of the day, if and when I choose to let this marriage go, it's going to be my decision, not your decision. You know, so we got to be careful with how we minister to wives who are going through hardships. And I had a few wonderful people that were really ministering me and met me where I was, you know, and prayed me to where I needed to be so I could make that decision on my own, you know. And then I know what it's like to think that you're gonna die at the hands of your spouse. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be raped by your spouse. I know all that stuff, you know. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know those experiences are in this room. Some of y'all might be dealing with it now. Some of y'all did go through it, you know. And I made it out. I made it out, right? But I know we recognize domestic violence, so we know, one of the sisters said in the circle last night, we know that everybody don't make it out, right? But I realized during that tenure in that relationship that God was calling me yet again, right? And I've learned that every hardship that we go through is for two reasons, and this is one of my mottos for life. Everything that you go through in life is for two reasons. That's your growth and God's glory. Everything that you go through. So here it is again. It's been another season of separation, you know. And the thing about it, in both of those marriages, even though it was a lot of dysfunction, I didn't just marry the man, I was committed to the covenant. And so as a separated woman, I did not date. Because it wasn't about pleasing that man, it was about pleasing the Lord. And as long as I was yoked up to somebody as their wife, I didn't put myself in a position to date and to sleep around and all that kind of stuff because I was still somebody's wife. And my goal was to glorify God and please God. And it didn't matter that I had people saying, well, you can date somebody, he ain't around, blah, blah, blah. No. My commitment first is to God, right? So I've been single spent 5 years separated from him with no intentions on getting back, right? And December of 2012, I had a coworker that was going through a divorce, and so she gave me her card for her lawyer, right? And I was gonna call her the next Monday, because I'm like, okay, income tax coming, this is my project. You know how you are when you broke. Every time you get a refund, you got a big project that you got to take care of. You know, the year before that, it was a car, you know. But this year, that car is all right. I'm finna get this divorce, right? And so that was Friday, I got that card. And then that Sunday night, around 10 o'clock, I got a phone call saying that he had been killed in a car accident. And the thing about it, I hadn't seen or talked to him in probably, Well, actually, the last time I saw him was when my daughter was about a year and a half. So she had absolutely no memory of her father, because he wasn't around. And but I grieved. I grieved for my daughter, because she would never know him as her father, And I grieved for him. I didn't even grieve for myself because I wasn't emotionally attached to him. But because I had that agape kind of love, I grieved for him because I felt so bad for him. Because I really wanted him to be able to experience a love relationship with the Lord without having a drug addiction. Yeah. Because I realized that he was broken. And I can't really expect him to love me if he don't even love himself. Yeah. So that liberated me from an expectation from him. So I consider myself a distant widow, right? Because I said I know it's widows in here, because I didn't have that attachment to him. I wasn't close to him. Like I said, I hadn't communicated with him in so long. So for about 10 years, I was by myself. And I know the sister is a widow, and I know it's probably other widows in here. And our stories don't necessarily look alike. But I was reading about a widow in 1 Kings chapter 17. And what the Lord ministered to me in that, I believe that he's ministering to all of us in that, right? In 1 Kings chapter 17, it talks about this widow, right? And God told the prophet Elisha to go to this widow because she would feed him, right? And when he got there, he asked her for some water, right? And then while she was going to get water, he says, bring me back some bread. And she says, I swear for real, I don't have anything. All I have is a little oil and a little and a little flour. And what I was going to do with that is make some bread. Me and my son were going to eat this, and then we were going to die because there's no food, And Elisha said, okay, go ahead. You go ahead and make the bread, but feed me first. Feed me first, and then feed yourself, right? Now, look at this. Look at what the Lord told me about, but I know he's telling anybody this, right? Elijah says, this is what God is saying. There will always be flour and oil in your containers. Somebody say your containers.
Your containers.
Your containers. Until the time when the Lord sends rain and the crops grow green again. When I read this story, God taught me 4 lessons, right? Really quick. He told me that one, if you only have a little, give that. She only had a handful of oil and a little flour, right? Had she not given that, she would have sabotaged her overflow. He said you will always have oil and flour for this, right? And then 2, God will never require you to give your last without blessing you with more. Never. And then 3, God will sustain you by your willingness to feed somebody else, right? And it might not be food, but it could be wisdom. It could be love. It could be encouragement. It could be support. But God will sustain you by your willingness to feed somebody else. And then this last one it just blew my mind. It says, the scripture says that there will always be oil and flour in your container until he sends the rain and the crops. There will always be what you need on the inside of your container until he sends the crop. What comes out of your container, which is the stuff that God puts in there, not what the crop provides, will be what sustains you. What comes from God will sustain you. What comes from the crop will supply you, right? So in my widow state, my divorce state, in my single again state, God sustains me by what he puts on the inside of me. On the inside of me. So that's for everybody. That's a story about a widow, but that's for everybody, right? So we have to understand that the crop won't always yield what you need. But God is telling you that if you position yourself, I will fill you with everything that you need all the time, right? And so fast forward, I'm almost done here. The first time I waited 6 years, right? And the second time. And let me say this to the singles, because I know we had some people say they wanted to get married. But one thing that I learned about my singleness is that if you listen to the wrong people, of course, if you're a Christian woman, you want a Christian man, but they will tell you, they will have you feeling so unqualified for marriage. It's ridiculous. You're too tall, you're too short, you're too thick, you ain't thick enough. You ain't got enough money, you ain't educated, you're too educated. It's a hot mess. But what I learned is that everything, this is what God orchestrates. Everything that you are and everything that you are not is enough for the right man. All right? So this time, God says this time, I'm going to be working on you for 11 years. I thought that 6 years was a long time. Okay. If we got to do it this way. But you know what? Because God transformed my thinking, even my desire for marriage wasn't even about me anymore. I developed a mindset that, you know what, I don't want a marriage, because you know how we are. We want marriage so we can stop having to pay all these bills by ourselves, so we can have some sinless sex, you know, all that kind of stuff, you know, travel together and all that kind of stuff, right? But God transformed my desire for marriage to be, if it ain't kingdom, I don't even want it.
Oh.
If the man that you have for, well, if the Lord has it for you, you can't. It's going to be kingdom. It's going to glorify God. But if I can't do that, if I can't walk in my purpose, if I can't live a life of purpose, then I don't want it. You know. And so what God did last year, He sent me one of His sons, right? And I'm kind of like Sister Gibbons, you know, she always, you know, she loves her husband, right? And he's tall and chocolate. I'm 5'11", my husband is 5'10", and he real light bright. But I love that white chocolate hair. And God delivered me from my flesh. He delivered me from my flesh when it came to what I wanted in somebody. And I tell this really affectionate, and I mean it, we all grown in here, right? I say, he ain't taller than me, but his hand's bigger than mine. I'm just saying. I'm married, I can say that.
All right, Tressa.
Yeah. So this is what God showed me in that transition. He says, I'm going to show you, even today, He's showing me why the enemy tried to kill me when I was a teenager. He's showing me why he tried to get rid of me when I was depressed. God is showing me why the enemy tried to destroy me when I was married to that second husband. But He says, before I show you that, before I lift you up, you have to get low. You got to get low. So in my low place, I made some transformations, right? I became a disciple and not just a Christian. Y'all know there's a difference, right? In my low place, I became devoted to the Lord, not just busy in the church. Because, you know, sometimes we can be faithful in church attendance and ministry work, but our lives don't translate to the glory of God. And then He transformed me from having a pleasure-driven life to a purpose-driven life. And so I finally, in other words, I finally learned that my life wasn't about me. It ain't about me. And you know, when it comes to ministry, if what I do, if you see more of me than you see of Christ, then I'm not doing something right. Because that's why He placed me here, right? And so my life was spared and saved and sanctified for the glory of God and not my own. But I had finally made my life, I had finally given my life to God. You know, before I just gave it to Him as my Savior, right? But I hadn't given it to Him to be my Lord yet, right? And so I allowed God to be my Lord and not just my Savior. That means that He actually gets to tell me what to do. I allow Him to tell me what to do. And like I said, God sent me one of His sons, and He sent me a good one. I couldn't have did that by myself. I couldn't have did that, you know. And I know that now, okay, I'm closing now, but I know that we've talked a lot about being survivors up in here, right? And I know it's a lot of survivors in here, breast cancer, domestic abuse, depression, and all that kind of stuff, you know. But I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you not to just survive, but to conquer, right? Because Jesus actually didn't survive His crucifixion, but He conquered it, right? He conquered it. And the Bible teaches us that we are more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. We're not just survivors, right? But as a conqueror, whether I live or die, I don't just tell my story. I tell Christ's story. You know how I do that? Because guess what? I died. And I was actually buried by the trials of life. But guess what? I got up. I got up. And so the fact that I got up, I can say, oh, death, where's your sting? Oh, abuse, where is your sting? Oh, divorce, where is your sting? Oh, depression, where is your sting? Oh, financial struggle, where is your sting? You don't have one, you know? And you don't develop this transformed mind outside of the will of God, because transformation is not just about developing, becoming a good person. It's actually about developing the mind of Christ. And I'll leave you with this. I look at life like our lives are like a cup on a saucer, right? You got the cup, right? And it's sitting on the saucer. But a lot of times, what we do is the content of the cup is what we want. And the overflow into the saucer is what we give God. But it should be the other way around. The content of the cup of your life belongs to Christ. And the overflow into the saucer is more than enough when it comes from God to give you everything that you want and need. So, thank you.